Chapter 1. The Beginning of Unease. The morning light streamed lazily through the half-drawn blinds, catching the edges of the kitchen counter in a faint gold hue. Daniel sat at the table, a half-drained mug of black coffee warming his palms. The smell of toasted bread lingered in the air, though the breakfast felt oddly quiet for a Thursday. He was used to Melissa chatting about the neighbors, the latest celebrity scandal, or some Pinterest recipe she wanted to try. But today, she sat across from him, hunched slightly forward, eyes glued to her phone screen. "Morning," he said, watching her thumb flick rapidly across the glass. No eye contact, just a distracted hum, a faint hum, as if he were a background noise in his own home. He tore a piece of toast, the crunch echoing in the silence. "Late night at work again?" he asked casually. Her hair was still damp from the shower, smelling faintly of something new, sweet but heavy, like a floral perfume he didn't recognize. Not her usual lavender, not the scent he'd kissed her neck with for years. Melissa finally glanced up, her expression caught between irritation and fatigue. "Yeah, just the usual. Deadlines, clients, meetings. You know how it is." She offered a thin smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, then went right back to scrolling. Daniel sipped his coffee, studying her in the morning light. Once upon a time, they used to sit here laughing, arguing about who made the better omelets, sharing kisses before he headed to the construction site. Now the space between them felt like an ocean. He tried again. "New perfume?" he asked lightly. "Smells different." "Not bad, just different." Melissa paused, her fingers hovering over the screen. "Oh yeah, picked it up with some girlfriends last weekend. Figured I'd change it up a bit." Her tone was breezy, but there was a faint edge there, as though she were already bracing for a follow-up question. Daniel nodded, masking his unease. "Looks good on you," he said simply. She smirked without looking up. "You mean smells good?" "Both," he offered, forcing a small chuckle. For a few moments, the only sound was the tick of the wall clock and the faint buzzing of her phone each time a message came in. She started keeping that thing on silent lately, he noticed. No more chirps or cheerful tones when text arrived, just quiet vibrations and quick, guarded glances. He set his mug down. "Melissa, you've been getting home late a lot lately. Everything okay?" Her head snapped up this time, eyebrows arching slightly. "Daniel, I've told you. Work is insane this month. We've got 2 campaigns overlapping. It's not like I'm out partying." "I didn't say you were," he replied, calm but steady. "I'm just saying, we don't really see each other much anymore. Feels like we're living in different time zones under the same roof." That earned a sigh, loud, pointed, theatrical. "You're overthinking again, Dan," she said, her voice tinged with that sharpness he hated hearing. "Not everything revolves around you." The words landed heavier than she might have intended. He swallowed them like bitter medicine, saying nothing at first. He stared at the crumbs on his plate, remembering when she used to tease him for worrying too much about her. Now, the teasing had turned to dismissal. He forced a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes either. "Maybe I am," he admitted. "Long days at the site, I guess. Makes a guy wonder if he's missing out on the good parts." Melissa shook her head and went back to her phone. "You're always missing the good parts, Daniel. That's what happens when work comes first." That one stung. He bit back the retort rising in his throat. He was working these long days for her, for them, for the mortgage, the bills, the vacations she loved planning. But lately, it felt like the more he gave, the more distant she became. He looked at her hands, manicured perfectly, fingers dancing over the keyboard of her phone. Once, those hands used to reach for his across the table, wrap around his arm while she leaned her head on his shoulder. Now they were busy elsewhere, typing, scrolling, hiding something he couldn't quite name. "Big plans this weekend?" he asked, trying to keep his tone neutral. She shrugged without looking up. "Might go out with the girls." "Don't wait up." "Another girls' night?" he asked, not accusatory, just surprised. "That's what, 3rd this month." Melissa finally set the phone down, her expression tight. "Is there a problem with me having a social life? You work 60 hours a week. What do you expect me to do? Sit here knitting until you come home?" Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it again. "No point. Not now." He picked up his coffee and drained the last of it, the bitterness matching the taste in his mouth. "No problem," he said finally, standing and rinsing his plate. Just making conversation. Melissa sighed again, rubbing her temple. Daniel, you're acting like I'm sneaking off to Vegas every weekend. It's dinner and wine. Can we not turn this into something it's not? He nodded slowly, the words sinking deeper than she realized. Something it's not. He hoped she was right. God, he hoped. He dried his hands and turned to her, taking in the way she avoided his gaze, the way her phone seemed to anchor her more than this kitchen ever did. All right, he said softly. Have fun with the girls. Thanks, she replied, picking up her phone again, already half out of the conversation. Daniel lingered a moment longer, then grabbed his jacket. I'll be late tonight, he said. Got a site meeting. Okay, she murmured, without lifting her head. He stepped out the door, the cool morning air biting at his face. As he climbed into his truck, he glanced back through the window. She was still at the table, phone in hand, a faint smile flickering across her face now, one he hadn't seen all morning. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. Work stress, he told himself. It's just work stress. Don't make a mountain out of a molehill, Dan. But as the engine rumbled to life, a quiet unease settled in his chest, heavy and cold. Something about her scent lingered in his nostrils, that unfamiliar perfume mixing with a faint trace of distance he couldn't wash away. The road stretched ahead, but his thoughts stayed behind at that table, with the woman who used to meet his eyes at breakfast, and now barely looked up at all. Chapter 2. The Missed Connection. The hum of the television filled the living room with background noise, though neither of them was really watching it. Daniel sat on the couch with a half-finished beer resting on the armrest, his boots still on, dust from the job site clinging to his jeans. Melissa was curled at the far end, legs tucked under a throw blanket, scrolling through her phone again, her new evening routine. It wasn't always like this. Once, they couldn't get enough of each other. They were that annoying couple in high school everyone rolled their eyes at, holding hands in the hallway, sneaking kisses at football games, sharing playlists on burnt CDs. He remembered working at a hardware store part-time, saving up to buy her that silver bracelet she wore all through senior year. They talked about forever like it was a promise written in the stars. He'd start his own construction business, she'd study marketing, and they'd build a life together, brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck. And they did. The house they lived in now was the result of those years. Early mornings, late nights, 1,000 compromises. Daniel thought he'd done right by her. He provided stability, comfort, more than he'd ever had growing up. But lately, it felt like comfort wasn't enough anymore. Melissa's voice broke the silence. I might not be home tomorrow evening, she said casually, still looking at her phone. Daniel glanced over. Another work thing? She hesitated for half a second too long. Girls' night. We're thinking wine and tapas. Just a few of us. He smiled faintly, more to himself than her. You girls sure are turning into quite the social club lately. Melissa finally looked up, eyebrows raised. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, he said with a shrug. Just, used to be we planned Friday nights together. Movies, takeout. Now I'm lucky if I catch you before midnight. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Daniel, I can't just sit at home every time you're working late. I need some life outside this house, you know? He raised his hands in mock surrender, forcing a chuckle. Hey, I get it. I'm just saying, feels like I should start making a reservation if I want to see my wife. She rolled her eyes and went back to scrolling. Maybe if you were home more, you'd know. The words hung in the air like smoke. They weren't shouted, but they landed sharp. Daniel stared at her profile, the soft glow of her phone screen lighting her cheekbones, and felt that pinch of guilt again. Maybe she was right. He was always working, meetings, clients, payroll, unexpected problems at the site. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept the lights on, the fridge stocked, the vacations booked. He'd always believed that was his role, to build the foundation so she never had to worry about it. I'm not blaming you, she added, softer now, though her eyes never left the phone. Just, I get lonely, you know. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, I know. He thought of the first year after they married, cheap dinners on the porch, late-night drives with music blasting, the way she used to fall asleep with her head on his chest when he came home, sweaty and exhausted, but happy. They had been in sync back then, 2 kids against the world. Now, even sitting 3 feet apart, it felt like there was a wall between them. He tried to bridge it. Tell you what, how about I get off early Saturday? We'll go somewhere nice. That Italian place you love. Melissa gave a non-committal hum. Maybe. I'll see what the girls are doing. There was again. Always the girls. He wanted to ask more. Who these girls were, why their names never came up, why her laughter sounded different when she spoke to them on the phone. But he bit his tongue. It felt petty, needy. He was a grown man, not a jealous boy. Still, that nagging feeling didn't leave. Dinner that night was a muted affair, steak for him, a salad for her. They sat across from each other, clinking cutlery, filling the air with little bursts of small talk that went nowhere. So, how's the site coming along? She asked, finally putting the phone down. Slow, he admitted. The supplier messed up the lumber order again. Spent half my day on the phone to try to fix it. Sometimes I wonder if I'm running a business or babysitting a circus. Melissa laughed lightly, a polite sound. Well, at least you're good at it. You always figure out. Yeah, he said, cutting into the steak. Figuring things out. That's my specialty. For a moment, their eyes met. There was something there, a flicker, maybe of the girl he once knew. But then her phone buzzed, and just like that, the moment was gone. Daniel leaned back in his chair, watching her fingers fly over the screen again. What's so urgent at 8:30 on a Thursday? He wondered. He toyed with his fork. Remember when we used to just sit here, talk for hours? Melissa glanced up, faintly puzzled. What do you mean? I mean, before all the busy schedules, before the phones at the table. We used to talk about everything. Stupid dreams, crazy plans. She smiled faintly. We were kids, Daniel. Life was simpler then. Doesn't have to be complicated now, he said. Her smile faded. It's not complicated. It's just different. People change. That landed in his gut like a stone. He nodded slowly, masking the ache. Yeah, people change. They finished dinner in near silence. Melissa excused herself to take a shower, phone in hand. Daniel cleared the table, rinsed the dishes, stared out the kitchen window at the darkening yard. Am I losing her? The thought came unbidden, like a whisper he didn't want to hear. He shook his head. No, they'd been through tough stretches before. Long hours, stress, it all added up. Still, when he climbed into bed later that night and found her already turned away from him, scrolling one last time before sleep, the gap between them felt wider than ever. He reached out, resting a hand gently on her hip. Night, he murmured. Night, she replied, already half asleep, or pretending to be. Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying her words. Maybe if you were home more, you'd know. Maybe she was right. Or maybe, he thought grimly, there was more to know than she was willing to say. Chapter 3. The Car Incident. The Saturday sun was already high when Daniel stepped out onto the driveway, keys jingling in his hand. Melissa had left early for what she called a spa day with friends, her words breezy and warm as she kissed his cheek on the way out. Don't wait up for me, babe. We might grab dinner after, she'd said, slipping into her sedan with a tote bag slung over her shoulder. He'd smiled, told her to enjoy herself, and waved as she backed out. No reason to think twice about it, at least not then. The next morning, she was rushing again. Hair tied up, coffee in one hand, her keys in the other. Can I take your truck today? She asked, not quite meeting his eyes as she slid her purse over her shoulder. He blinked at her. What's wrong with your car? Just needs gas, she said quickly. I didn't have time to fill it up yesterday. I'm already late. He shrugged. Sure. Keys are on the counter. She pecked his cheek, mumbled a thanks, you're the best, and was out the door before he could even ask where she was headed. Now, standing in the driveway with her car sitting there, her precious pearl gray sedan that she usually treated like a second home, he decided to do her the favor. Fill up, maybe wash it. They had always shared that kind of rhythm in their marriage. Small acts of care, little unspoken gestures. He opened the driver's side door, slid in, and immediately paused. The smell hit him. Not the familiar faint vanilla air freshener she liked. Not the lingering coffee scent from her morning runs. This was different. Strong, musky, sour, almost animal-like, clinging to the fabric. He wrinkled his nose, leaning forward to sniff again, uncertain. What the hell? He murmured. He turned the key, engine humming to life, and drove to the nearest gas station, the scent gnawing at the back of his throat the whole way. The farther he drove, the harder it was to ignore, thick, cloying like sweat and something else. At the pump, he stepped out, opened the back door on a hunch. The seat belt hung loose, the backrest slightly reclined, as if someone had pushed it back carelessly. His eyes narrowed. Melissa was meticulous about her car. She hated mess, always kept it pristine. He leaned in further, one hand braced on the doorframe. The smell was stronger here, almost rancid. His gaze swept over the upholstery, the floor mats, the faint smudges on the window. Then his eyes caught it. A darkened patch on the rear seat, wet, faintly glistening in the morning sun. He touched it. His fingers came away slick, a faint, slimy residue clinging to his skin. He jerked his hand back like it burned. "What the hell is this?" he whispered, his heart starting to pound now. Beneath the seat belt buckle, half tucked into the crevice, something crinkled. He reached down, pinched it between his fingers, and pulled. A torn foil wrapper. Latex. Used. For a moment, the world tilted. The gas station, the hum of the cars, the bright sunlight, it all blurred. He stared at the thing in his hand, his mind screaming to find another explanation. Anything. Maybe one of her friends borrowed the car? Maybe, God, what was he even thinking? "No," he said aloud, his voice harsh in the empty car. "No, she wouldn't. Not like this, not in our car." His hands were shaking. He dropped the thing like it was toxic, wiping his fingers against his jeans as though he could scrub the memory away. He sat there for a long moment, fingers gripping the steering wheel, his pulse drumming in his ears. Images started to flicker in his mind, her distracted smiles, the late nights, the perfume he didn't recognize, the sudden fondness for girls' nights. It all started to click in the worst possible way. But still, some part of him resisted. This was Melissa, the girl who danced with him barefoot in their first tiny kitchen, the woman who cried when he surprised her with their first vacation, the wife he had built a life for, brick by brick, hour by hour. "She wouldn't," he said again, softer this time, almost pleading. A car honked behind him. His pump had finished, the attendant waiting for him to move. Daniel jolted, shoved the nozzle back, and climbed behind the wheel, the wrapper now crumpled on the passenger seat like some sick evidence. He drove home on autopilot, every muscle tense, the smell still thick in his nostrils. Every bump in the road rattled through his chest like a drumbeat of betrayal. When he parked in the driveway, he didn't get out immediately. He sat there, staring at the steering wheel, his hands pale against the leather. What was he supposed to do? Call her? Demand an explanation? Storm into her office and throw the evidence on her desk, like a detective in some cheap thriller? No, not yet. His father's voice echoed in his head, something he'd said years ago. "Don't swing blind, boy. Aim first. Breathe. Then hit." Daniel took a slow breath, his hands still trembling, the smell still choking the air. He closed the back door gently, as though afraid the whole thing might vanish if he slammed it. Locked the car, and stood there in his own driveway with a sick, twisting knot in his gut and 1,000 questions gnawing at his skull. Chapter 4. The Dashcam Revelation. The house was quiet when Daniel got home. Too quiet. Melissa wasn't back yet. She'd texted something about staying late to catch up on reports, a line that now tasted like acid in his throat. He set the keys on the kitchen counter, his gaze drifting toward her car parked outside. That faint, rancid smell was still lodged in his memory. The wet patch, the wrapper, ghosts clinging to the upholstery. He grabbed the dash cam from the glove compartment, his fingers trembling slightly as he disconnected the small device. He hadn't touched it in months. It was one of those things he installed for insurance purposes and forgot about. But now, it felt like the only thread left to pull. Back inside, he plugged it into his laptop at the kitchen table. The screen flickered to life, showing rows of timestamp files. Friday afternoon, Friday evening, Saturday morning. His heart began to pound. Breathe, Daniel, he told himself. You're just going to confirm she ran some errands. That's all. He clicked on the first suspicious timestamp, late Friday night. The grainy footage loaded. The car was parked on a dimly lit street, dashboard lights glowing faintly. Then the door opened and Melissa slid in, hair down, makeup still perfect. Not spot A casual. dressed to impress. Daniel leaned forward, eyes narrowing. A moment later, the passenger door opened. A man stepped in, big, broad-shouldered, dark-skinned, wearing a fitted t-shirt that clung to his frame. He laughed as he climbed in, and the sound made Daniel's jaw clench. Then another door opened, the rear seat this time. Another man, just as large, just as casually confident, slipping in with a grin like he owned the night. Melissa's voice, airy and light, floated through the speakers. "You two sure know how to make an entrance." Daniel's grip on the mouse tightened. The car started moving. They drove through streets he didn't recognize at first, then down a narrow road leading toward the old industrial area near the river. The dashcam picked up their laughter, snippets of conversation, a casual intimacy that made his skin crawl. "Your man's a fool, letting you roam like this," one of the men said, his voice deep and mocking. Melissa giggled, a sound Daniel hadn't heard in months. Not like that. Not for him. He's too busy being Mr. Perfect Provider. The words stabbed like ice through his chest. He rewound, played again. The same giggle, the same line. His heart thudded, a slow, heavy beat echoing in his ears. He could almost hear his own breath, ragged, uneven, as the footage continued. The car pulled into a shadowy parking lot behind an old warehouse. The camera caught faint movement. Melissa climbing into the back seat, the two men shifting with her. Laughter turned to muffled whispers, then to shapes leaning close, hands moving where the camera couldn't fully see. The dome light flickered on for a second, just long enough to show her face, flushed, lips parted, her hands on one man's chest. Daniel's vision blurred. He pressed pause, sat back in his chair, stared at the frozen image. His hands were trembling again, but this time not with confusion. This time it was something darker, heavier. "That's my wife," he thought, a bitter laugh bubbling in his chest. "That's the woman I built a life for. The woman I trusted while I broke my back, putting food on this table." He played the footage again, slower this time, his eyes cold, taking in every twitch, every giggle. They stayed parked for nearly an hour. The camera couldn't see everything, mercifully, perhaps, but it didn't need to. The shadows moving, the windows fogging, the occasional burst of laughter was enough. Every few minutes, one of the men said something, little taunts, cocky remarks that dripped into Daniel's ears like poison. "She said you're always tired," one voice chuckled at one point. "Man's building houses but can't keep his own." Melissa's laugh followed, low and breathy. Daniel slammed his laptop shut so hard the table rattled. The sudden silence was deafening. He stood, paced the kitchen, running a hand through his hair. The air felt too thick, the walls too close. His reflection in the dark window looked like a stranger, jaw tight, eyes hard, breathing shallow. He thought of their mornings together, the casual kisses, the coffee he brewed for her every damn day. He thought of the nights he stayed late at the site, believing he was doing right by her, only for her to fill that time with this. "Calm down," he told himself. "Don't break anything. Not yet." His phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Melissa, running a little late. "Don't wait up." He stared at the screen, then at the laptop sitting like a loaded gun on the table. Every muscle in his body wanted to confront her right now. Drive to wherever she was, show her the footage, demand answers. But something colder was creeping in now, pushing past the raw hurt. A calculating quiet. He sat back down slowly, reopening the laptop. The footage played again, the mocking laughter filling the kitchen like smoke. "She's too busy being Mr. Perfect Provider," he repeated under his breath, the phrase tasting like ash. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He just sat there, breathing hard, his fingers drumming slowly against the table. The clock ticked past midnight. Melissa wasn't home, and Daniel was no longer the man he had been that morning. Chapter 5. The Storm Inside. The clock on the nightstand glowed, 12:43 a.m., its soft red digits burning into the darkness. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan, each slow rotation marking another second Daniel lay there awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Melissa had slipped in almost an hour ago, heels clicking lightly on the hardwood, a faint waft of perfume trailing behind her, that perfume. The same sweet, heavy scent that no longer felt like hers, not to him. She'd murmured something about a long night with the girls, kissed the air near his cheek, and disappeared into the bathroom. He'd kept his breathing slow, steady, feigning sleep while his heart rattled like a loose beam in a storm. Now she was beside him, back turned, the glow of her phone screen illuminating the sheets. Her fingers tapped rapidly, thumbs darting like small snakes over the glass. He closed his eyes halfway, lashes low, watching the reflection of that light flicker against the wall. Each buzz, each quiet click of her nails against the screen made his jaw clench tighter. Were you talking to Melissa? The image from the dashcam replayed in his mind. The dim parking lot, the broad-shouldered shadows, her laugh. The same laugh that used to be his. The smell. God, the smell. It had soaked into his shirt, followed him through the evening like a curse. He could almost feel the slick residue on his fingertips again, as if it were seared into his skin. He rolled slightly, careful not to disturb the mattress. Her silhouette was still, one leg tucked over the other, her phone angled away from him. She didn't notice his eyes on her, didn't sense the storm brewing inches away. His breath caught when she let out a soft giggle, quiet but real. Not the polite laugh she'd given him over dinner last week. Not the weary sigh laugh she offered when he told a lame joke. This one had warmth. Mischief. She typed again, quick bursts, then stilled. He shut his eyes fully, forcing his body limp as her weight shifted. The phone clicked off, and she slid it under her pillow like contraband. Melissa turned toward him briefly, perhaps to check if he was truly asleep. He kept his breathing even, the slow rhythm of a man long gone to dreams. Her fingers brushed his shoulder lightly, a ghost of a touch. "Night," she whispered. He didn't answer. She settled back, pulling the comfort of her chin, and within minutes her breathing deepened, the kind that came with real sleep. Daniel stared at the ceiling again, his own eyes wide open now. His mind felt like a kettle left on the stove, heat building, no whistle yet, just a low, angry hum. Should I confront her now? The thought came sharp, tempting. Shake her awake, hold that dashcam footage in her face, demand every name, every detail. But what then? Tears? Lies? Another round of, "You're overthinking again, Dan." He pictured her face if he did, smug at first, then wide-eyed, then defensive. He pictured his own voice, hoarse with rage, and the whole thing unraveling into chaos before dawn. No, not yet. His father's words from years ago, building their first house together, echoed in his head. Measure twice, cut once. He needed to measure this. Every angle, every nail. His masculinity burned in his chest, a raw wound. The dashcam wasn't just evidence of betrayal, it was mockery. Her words haunted him. He's too busy being Mr. Perfect Provider. Perfect provider. That's what he'd broken his back to be. And now it was the punchline to a private joke whispered in a dark car by men who had no business knowing his wife that way. He turned his face into the pillow, biting down hard, forcing the heat in his throat to cool. From the bathroom door, a faint glimmer of her discarded dress caught his eye. Low neckline, short hemline. Not spot A attire. Not the woman who used to beg him to come home early so they could cook dinner together. He remembered the last argument they'd had about his hours. "You're just boring lately, Daniel," she'd said, tossing her hair over her shoulder, phone in hand. "Work, eat, sleep, repeat. There's nothing left for me here sometimes." He'd laughed it off at the time, called her dramatic. But lying here now, her words stung like a brand. Boring. Provider. Predictable. He traced the ceiling cracks with his eyes, the shadows bending and stretching with the fan's rotation. His rage wasn't hot anymore. It was cooling, condensing into something heavier, something that didn't roar but waited. "She thinks I'm boring?" He thought bitterly. "She has no idea what I'm capable of when I stop being nice." The sheets rustled as Melissa shifted in her sleep, murmuring something he couldn't catch. Her phone buzzed faintly under the pillow, a ghost vibration against the mattress. He stared at that faint bulge under the pillow, fingers twitching. One motion and he could have it. One motion and the rest of the night would be answers, not questions. But again, he didn't move. Not tonight. He exhaled slowly, letting the air leave his lungs like steam from vent. There would be a time, just not now. The clock blinked to 07 a.m. Daniel lay awake, eyes open in the dark, a man beside his wife yet miles away from her, the smell of strangers and betrayal thick in his memory, his rage cooling into a cold, deliberate patience. Chapter 6. The trap is set. The following morning, Daniel poured himself a black coffee, the bitterness anchoring him while his mind ran like a silent engine. Melissa breezed through the kitchen in a figure-hugging dress that seemed to announce itself before she even spoke. A neckline he hadn't seen in years, lipstick a shade too bold for a staff lunch. "Going somewhere nice?" he asked, stirring his cup without looking up. She slipped on her heels, her reflection catching the stainless steel of the fridge. "Just the office. Big meeting. You know how it is." His gaze lingered on the hemline for a beat too long, then back to his mug. "Right. Meetings must have gotten fancier since I was in the loop." She gave a little laugh, tight, dismissive. "Don't start, Dan. It's work." He smiled, a slow, polite one. "Wouldn't dream of starting anything, Mel." Inside, though, he was already moving 3 steps ahead. That afternoon, he stepped into his office, blueprints and steel dust still clinging to the air, and closed the door behind him. His phone felt heavier than usual as he scrolled through his contacts and found the number he hadn't called in years. Victor Hayes, his attorney since the early days of his construction business. "Vic," Daniel said when the line picked up. "I need to talk." Discreetly. The voice on the other end hesitated. "That doesn't sound like a tax question, Dan." "It's not. And it's not business. Not the kind you file under company expenses, anyway." They agreed to meet after hours. Before leaving, he forwarded the dashcam footage to a secure drive, labeling the file something innocuous, Inventory 2021. Then he dug into their shared phone plan online. Melissa had been careful, but not careful enough. A string of late-night texts, data spikes around odd hours, locations pinging far from her supposed girls' nights. By the time he got to Victor's office, dusk was painting the city in orange and gray. Victor leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. "This about your wife?" Daniel gave a small, humorless chuckle. "What gave it away? You look like a man chewing glass. And you don't call me unless someone's either suing you or screwing you." Daniel slid a flash drive across the desk. "Both, maybe. Watch that when you're alone. I need to know what my options are." Quietly, Victor studied him for a moment, his usual bravado tempered. "You want out, or you want blood?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "I want the truth to bleed before I sign anything." Over the next week, Daniel played the role he'd perfected years ago. Dependable, steady, boring husband. He cooked Sunday breakfast, texted her midday with casual check-ins, kissed her cheek when she got home. Melissa, emboldened by his apparent indifference, only grew more reckless. Her dresses shorter, her perfume stronger, the faint scent of someone else's cologne sometimes clinging to her hair when she leaned in to grab a plate. One Thursday evening, she came in at 11:45 p.m., heels in hand, mascara slightly smudged. "You're up," she said, surprised to find him on the couch. "Late paperwork," he murmured, eyes on the TV. "Good night." "Long," she replied quickly, avoiding his gaze. "We had to wrap up some stuff at the office." He nodded, flipping the channel. "You should get some rest. Big day tomorrow, right?" She froze a fraction of a second, just long enough for him to catch it, before forcing a smile and heading upstairs. 2 days later, in the back office of one of his sites, Daniel was reviewing invoices when an old friend, Mark, a foreman with a nose for trouble, knocked on the doorframe. "You got a minute?" Mark asked, stepping in with that cautious tone men used when they weren't sure if they were crossing a line. Daniel closed the folder. "What's up?" Mark scratched his jaw. "I was at Juno's bar last night. Saw Melissa there. She wasn't with her office crowd." Daniel raised an eyebrow slowly. "No. 2 guys. Big guys. Didn't look like the wine and salad type. Just thought you should know." Daniel leaned back in his chair, letting the silence hang. "You sure it was her?" Mark gave a little shrug. Thayer laughed. "Dressed, yeah, I'm sure." "Look, I ain't trying to stir up." Daniel held up a hand, cutting him off. "I appreciate it, Mark. Really." Mark hesitated. "Dan, you sure she's not playing you?" A smirk tugged at the corner of Daniel's mouth. a shadow of something colder. Oh, she's playing all right. Just doesn't know the game's about to end. Mark watched him for a second, then nodded slowly and left, closing the door behind him. That night, Daniel sat at the kitchen table long after Melissa had gone to bed. The house bathed in the quiet hum of the refrigerator. In front of him lay a neat stack. Dashcam drive, printouts of her GPS history, a timeline scribbled in his own handwriting. Every late-night message, every perfume-soaked return, every dismissive remark, each a nail in the coffin she didn't know she was building for herself. He ran a hand over his face, exhaustion creeping in, but his mind clear as polished glass. She thought she had the upper hand. Let her, because now the trap was set. Chapter 7. The Confrontation. Daniel had always been a man who preferred building things with his hands, houses, offices, even the life he thought he shared with Melissa. But tonight, he was about to dismantle something instead. He reserved a corner table at Bella Vita, the kind of upscale Italian place they hadn't been to in years. White tablecloths, soft jazz, wine that came in bottles worth more than the groceries for a week. When Melissa arrived, she looked radiant in a wine-colored dress, hair curled, perfume thick and sweet. Her smile was bright but wary. "This is a surprise," she said, kissing his cheek. "What's the occasion?" "Us," Daniel replied simply, pulling out her chair. "Thought we could reconnect. Been a while since we just sat down, you know." She arched an eyebrow, half smirking. "Well, color me flattered." They ordered a bottle of red and a spread of antipasti. Conversation started light, her office drama, his project deadlines, the new foreman he'd hired. She laughed at his dry jokes, touched his hand once across the table. To anyone watching, they looked like a couple rekindling their spark. But Daniel's eyes never softened. By the time the entrees arrived, he had steered the conversation to her weekend plans, her spa days, her late nights. "Busy lately," he said casually, slicing into his steak. "You've been out more than in." Melissa waved a hand, already defensive. "It's just been a hectic quarter. You know how it is." "Yeah," he said, chewing slowly. "I know how it is. You meet new people, schedules shift, priorities realign." She gave a tight laugh, picking at her pasta. "What's that supposed to mean?" Daniel set down his knife and fork, leaned back slightly, eyes steady on her. "So how are those two guys? Big enough for you?" The clatter of her fork hitting the plate was louder than the music. Her face drained to a pale mask, eyes darting to see if anyone nearby had heard. "What?" she whispered, a sharp edge beneath her voice. "What did you just say?" "You heard me." Melissa swallowed hard, forcing a scoff. "Dan, are you out of your mind?" That's not what you think. You're twisting things." "Am I?" Daniel's voice didn't rise. It dropped cold and cutting. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out his phone, and with a few swipes, placed it face up on the table. The dim glow of the screen played the dashcam footage. The sound of her laughter, the sight of her in their car, the silhouettes of two large men in the back seat. The restaurant's ambient chatter faded his ears. Melissa stared, her lips parting as her reflection flickered in the glass of the phone. "That," she started, then stopped, her voice faltering. That's not what it looks like." Daniel tilted his head slightly, a humorless smile creeping in. "No? You sure? Because to me, it looks exactly like what it smells like in that car. Sour, used and not mine." She reached for the phone, but he drew it back. "Dan, please, please what? Don't embarrass you? Don't shatter the pretty little image you've been selling me while you've been selling yourself on the side." Her eyes welled, though the tears didn't fall. "You don't understand. I've been lonely, you're never home, and He cut her off with a low laugh. "Oh, so this is my fault now? I worked my hands raw to give you a house, a life most people would kill for. And your thank you is what? Sharing the backseat with a couple of guys who probably can't even spell your name." She flinched. "You're being cruel." Daniel leaned forward, elbows on the table, his voice a sharp whisper now. "I build homes for a living, Melissa, but I guess I never built you enough of one to keep your legs closed." The words landed like a hammer strike. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The waiter hovered a few tables away, unsure whether to approach. Melissa's face had gone from shock to anger to a kind of desperate calculation. "You don't know the whole story," she muttered. "You don't know what I've been through." Daniel picked up his wine, swirled it once, and set it down without drinking. "No, I don't. But I know enough." She reached across the table, fingers trembling, trying to touch his hand. "We can fix this." "We can." He stood, pocketing his phone, chair scraping softly against the polished floor. "You've already fixed it, Mel. Just not with me." Chapter 8. The Fallout. The ride home from the restaurant was suffocatingly silent. Melissa stared out the passenger window, arms crossed, mascara streaking slightly at the corners of her eyes. Daniel gripped the steering, like it was the only thing tethering him to control. When they stepped inside the house, the familiar warmth of their home felt foreign, like a stage set for a life that had just ended. Melissa spun on him the moment the door shut. "Daniel, please just listen to me. It didn't mean anything. I was lonely. I don't even know what I was thinking." Daniel hung his coat, methodical and calm, then turned to face her. "It meant enough to ruin everything." Her lips quivered. "You think this was some grand plan to hurt you? It wasn't. I made a mistake." He raised an eyebrow, the coldest smirk she had seen from him in years. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is burning dinner. What you did, that's a decision. Repeated. Planned. Hidden." She took a step forward, reaching for his hand. "We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can, Melissa." His voice dropped like an iron bar. "Stop." The sudden sharpness made her freeze. Upstairs, a faint door creaked. Little footsteps padded across the hallway. Their daughter, Emma, peeked down from the staircase, her sleepy eyes wide. "Mommy? Daddy? Are you fighting?" Melissa spun around, hastily wiping her face. "No, honey, it's just grown-up stuff. Go back to bed." Daniel forced a tight smile for his daughter. "Hey, sweetheart, everything's fine. Daddy just needs to pack a few things." Emma frowned, but obeyed, retreating to her room. Melissa turned back to him, panic flaring. "Pack? What do you mean, pack? Where are you going?" "Somewhere quiet," he said simply. "Somewhere I don't smell betrayal every time I breathe." She followed him up the stairs, her voice rising. "You're just going to walk out? After everything we've built? After all the years, Daniel, please." He entered their bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled out a duffel bag. Socks, shirts, a few essentials. His movements were precise, cold, like a man who had already made peace with the ending. Melissa leaned against the doorway, tears streaming freely now. "You're not even going to give me a chance?" "I gave you 12 years of chances," he muttered, zipping the bag. "You cashed them in for a back seat party." She slapped her hand against the doorframe. "You don't know how it feels to be neglected, to feel invisible in your own home while you're off building everyone else's dream houses. You needed respect for your vows," he snapped, finally meeting her eyes. "You needed to talk to me, not them." Silence filled the room after that. Just the faint hum of the heater and Melissa's uneven breathing. Daniel walked past her with the bag. "Don't wake the kids with more yelling. They don't deserve to carry this." He slept on the couch that night, staring at the ceiling, her muffled sobs echoing from upstairs. His phone buzzed twice around midnight, her texts. "I'm sorry. Please talk to me." He didn't reply. By dawn, he was showered, dressed, and sitting in his truck outside the office of Jackson and Myers, his lawyer of 10 years. The morning air was sharp, and the bitterness in his chest matched it. Jackson, a broad-shouldered man with salt and pepper hair, looked over the evidence with a low whistle. "Dashcam, timestamps, GPS logs. Daniel, this is airtight. Can we move fast?" Daniel asked, voice flat. Jackson nodded. "With this, you'll come out clean. No one can twist this against you. Custody's likely to lean your way, house as well." Daniel exhaled, the first real breath he'd felt since the restaurant. "Do it." By mid-morning, the papers were filed. His phone, however, hadn't stopped buzzing, missed calls, voicemails, a stream of desperate texts. "Please, we can fix this. Dan, I'll do anything. Don't destroy our family over one mistake. You're punishing everyone for this, not just me." He scrolled through them without answering. Not out of cruelty, out of finality. Because every word felt like a lie stitched together with panic. That evening, when he returned to the house, Melissa was sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes swollen from crying, a cup of untouched coffee beside her. "You filed, didn't you?" she whispered. Daniel set his keys down, calm as a still pond. "Yes." Tears welled again. "How could you do that without even trying to fix it?" He tilted his head. "How could you do what you did and expect me to stay?" She had no answer, just silence, and the faint sound of their son's video game upstairs, oblivious to the storm breaking below. Chapter 9. The Revenge and Rebirth. The divorce papers have been filed, and the house that once echoed with forced apologies and fake promises now stood eerily quiet. Daniel had moved into a sleek two-bedroom downtown, nothing fancy but clean, modern, and his. The first week felt like numb survival. Eat, work, sleep. But then the numbness began to peel away, replaced by a fire he hadn't felt in years. He started at the gym again, early mornings before the crew clocked in at the construction site. Sweat soaked his shirt as iron clanked against iron, each rep burning through the anger still lodged in his chest. The trainers, younger guys with biceps the size of hammers, nodded at his discipline. "Back at it, huh?" one of them asked. Daniel wiped his forehead, smirking. Back from the dead, more like. Outside of the gym, his life started to shift. Old friends, the ones Melissa had often brushed off as bad influences, invited him out more. A few beers at the bar, weekend hikes, poker nights. For once, he said yes. One Friday evening, at a rustic steakhouse, his oldest friend Mark leaned across the booth with a sly grin. "So, Mr. Newly Single, ready to get back in the game?" Daniel cut into his ribeye, savoring it. "Not rushing it," he said. "Gonna rebuild the foundation before I start adding floors, you know?" Mark chuckled. Classic builder talk. But rebuild he did. A new car, a matte gray sedan that turned heads at stoplights, sat in his new garage. Not a midlife crisis purchase, a statement. One that said, "I'm still here, and I'm moving forward." He started posting casually on social media. Not forced, not showy, just snapshots of his new routines. A photo from a lakeside weekend with the boys. Him holding a fishing rod, grin wide, sunset blazing behind him. Another of his new kitchen, glass of whiskey in hand, captioned, "First meal in the new place." Empty space, full plate. The likes rolled in, and among them, Melissa's silent account always lingered near the top. He knew she saw them. That was part of it. 2 weeks later, he bumped into an old acquaintance at a local coffee shop, a brunette named Vanessa from the supplier's office. She raised an eyebrow when she saw him. "Daniel? Wow, you look different." "Good different, I hope," he said, stirring his black coffee. "Confident," she replied with a smile. "Single." "Officially," he answered, leaning back. "Why?" "No reason," she teased. "Just hadn't seen you smile like that in years." They chatted, exchanged numbers, and while he didn't jump into anything serious, the energy of being wanted again felt like oxygen in his lungs. Meanwhile, Melissa's texts had grown fewer, colder. The last one was almost bitter. "So, this is what you wanted? Parading your new life like a prize." He read it, grinned faintly, and set the phone down without replying. At the gym one evening, Mark spotted Melissa's name flash briefly on Daniel's phone screen. "She's still fishing?" "Trying," Daniel said, sliding the phone face down on the bench. Mark smirked. "You know, I never liked her. Always had that queen of the hive thing going on." Daniel chuckled darkly, adjusting the weights. "She want an upgrade? She just made me one." And that became his mantra. The next few weeks, he poured more hours into the business. Without the constant stress at home, his focus sharpened. Deals closed faster. Clients complimented his newfound edge. He even started mentoring a few of the younger crew members, showing them the ropes after hours. One Saturday, his daughter Emma came to stay for the weekend. They baked cookies, played board games, and she marveled at his new place. "It's smaller," she said innocently, "but it feels happier." Daniel knelt to her level. "That's because no house matters if it's full of fighting, sweetheart. This one, it's full of peace." She smiled, and for the first time in months, so did he, genuinely. Melissa, on the other hand, seemed to wither in the distance. Rumors floated through mutual friends. She'd cut her hair, started dressing down, wasn't posting her girls' nights anymore. Once, Daniel overheard one of his crew members mutter, "She thought she could do better, guess not." He didn't feed it. Didn't need to. His revenge wasn't in shouting or dragging her name. It was in every mile he ran, every deal he signed, every night he slept without a knot in his gut. By late fall, Daniel stood at the balcony of his apartment, city lights twinkling beneath him, a glass of bourbon in hand. The man who had once begged for scraps of respect now lived with abundance, of self-worth, of strength, of quiet triumph. He checked his phone. Vanessa had texted, "Dinner tomorrow." He smiled, tapped out a simple, "Sounds good." The past was ashes now, and from those ashes, he was building something solid again. Chapter 10. The closing line. The courthouse lobby was sterile, its pale walls reflecting the fluorescent light in a way that made everything feel unreal. Daniel adjusted the cuff of his crisp white shirt and stepped into the small conference room, the air thick with the scent of polished wood and bureaucracy. Across the table, Melissa sat slouched, her once pristine hair now slightly frizzy, dark circles under her eyes. She looked smaller somehow, worn down. He couldn't help but notice the contrast between her and him. He stood straighter than he had in months, muscles taut beneath the tailored jacket, jaw sharp, eyes bright. The man who had once been blindsided now radiated control, clarity, and a calm fury that didn't scream but cut through the air like glass. The lawyer shuffled papers. "Everything appears in order. If both of you sign here and here, the divorce will be finalized today." Melissa swallowed, glancing up at Daniel. Her voice was quieter than he expected, almost fragile. "Daniel, please. I know I messed up, but you have to understand." "I didn't." He interrupted with a slow shake of his head. "I understand perfectly." She leaned forward, desperation creeping in. "You really won't forgive me?" Daniel's lips curved into a smirk, the kind that didn't need to be loud to sting. He tapped the pen lightly against the contract. "Forgiveness is for mistakes, Melissa. You made a choice." Her hands trembled as she clutched the edge of the table. "But it wasn't, we can still work this out, right?" He raised a brow, letting silence stretch between them. The seconds ticked by, echoing in the small room. He could feel the shift. Her confidence from years ago, the cocky charm that had once drawn him in, now crumbling into panic and shame. "Work it out," he finally said, voice even but laced with steel. "Do you really think there's a world where I'm the fool sitting at the table while you pretend this never happened?" Melissa's lips parted, no words forming. She realized then that all her attempts, gaslighting, charm, apologies, were useless. She was out of moves. Daniel picked up the pen, flipping it with precision. His hands didn't shake, they didn't hesitate. Calm, controlled, unflinching. He signed. The crisp click of the pen, closing the contract, felt louder than any argument they'd ever had. Melissa followed, hands slightly unsteady, her signature scrawled like a shadow of the confidence she once wielded. She pushed the papers toward the lawyer, who gathered them efficiently, then looked at Daniel. "Congratulations, Mr. Whitman," the lawyer said. "It's officially finalized." Daniel nodded, a small, victorious smile curling at the edge of his lips. He didn't gloat. There was no need. The victory was his simply by virtue of surviving, by virtue of rising sharper and stronger. Melissa's shoulders slumped, her head tilting slightly down. She whispered, almost too soft for him to hear, I never thought it would end like this." Daniel leaned back slightly in his chair, eyes locked on her. "Neither did I. But sometimes endings aren't about losing. They're about cleaning up the mess someone else left behind." Her mouth opened, as if to reply, but no words came. Only the faint sound of the fluorescent lights buzzing above. He stood, sliding the papers into his leather folder, every movement deliberate, controlled, and calm. He felt the weight of the years of betrayal lift with each step toward the door. The world outside waited, bright and buzzing, unaware of the personal storm that had just concluded in this small, quiet room. Melissa followed slowly, shoulders hunched, carrying nothing but the ghost of what she had once been. She paused at the threshold, glancing back at him, eyes wet but defiant in a subtle way. Daniel met her gaze once more. "Sometimes you don't lose a wife. You just take out the trash and find your peace. He didn't wait for her reaction. The words hung in the air like smoke, sharp, final, irreversible. Outside, the city hummed as usual. People walked past, oblivious to the emotional battlefield that had just concluded inside those walls. Daniel exhaled, deep and steady, feeling lighter than he had in years. The sun glinted off his new watch, off the polished truck waiting in the lot. Life stretched ahead, clean, untangled, and entirely his own. He slid into the driver's seat, hands gripping the wheel, muscles relaxed, spine straight. The dashboard glowed softly as he started the engine, the quiet rumble beneath him a satisfying note of finality. He thought of the gym, of late nights with loyal friends, of his new apartment, his daughter laughing, the memories of betrayal that had once burned through him like wildfire. Now, all that fire had been tempered, refined, transformed into something stronger, discipline, clarity, and peace. Melissa watched him from the curb for a long moment, her presence fading as he drove away. Her car reflected the sun in the windshield like a dull memory, her own scent on the air gone unnoticed by him. As the city blurred past the window, Daniel felt it. The liberation of taking back control, the satisfaction of having acted deliberately, the quiet thrill of knowing he had rebuilt himself from the wreckage she had left behind. For once, he wasn't running from pain. He was walking toward life. Calm, collected, victorious, not in anger, but in the unwavering understanding that his world was his own to shape. The road ahead was open, bright, and full of possibilities, and Daniel Whitman, for the first time in years, was exactly where he belonged. Free, whole, and untouchable. And in the quiet of that drive, one thought settled in his mind like a stone set in concrete. Sometimes you don't lose a wife. You just take out the trash and find your peace. The city lights stretched on before him, each one a small promise of a life reclaimed, of battles won quietly and with dignity, of the ultimate truth. He was done being the victim. Daniel smiled faintly, the corners of his mouth lifting with a calm satisfaction that would last far longer than any anger, any heartbreak, any betrayal ever could. The past was behind him. The future, wide and bright, awaited.